Today is an interesting day because I finally get to talk about something that I'm so passionate about talking about to help awaken, enlighten, and even educate you about our true origins and where we came from. And I have a very special guest joining us to talk about ancient civilizations and the Anunnaki pantheons and so much more. So please welcome Antionette Muerer. Now,
Hello.
hello. Did I say Muir? Is
It's
that
just Muerer.
Muir?
Uh-huh.
Everyone gets a crack out of me when I pronounce certain words, but they get it finally. So that's all said and done, and all good. So, Antoinette, we met through Facebook on a group page
Right.
that has to deal with history of the Anunnaki.
Just 1 second. You can take it downstairs, sweetheart, and you can fill it with water. It is milk currently. You can fill it with water. Okay. I'm on a live podcast, so I gotta go. Bye. Sorry, I missed your question. Oh yeah, we originally met up on one of those Anunnaki groups, but it was really weird and short-lived for me because
Yes.
it was just full of toxic people, I felt like.
Well, not only that, but so small-minded.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm just like, but there's evidence, people. I mean, come on, it's all over the world. And I became I guess I started my awakening journey when I was going through, my divorce and questioning why in the hell am I here? What's the purpose?
Right.
Everything. And I think everybody goes through that in a certain period of their time in life. And I just got so fed up with religion. And I'm like, I want to know the truth. I'm done.
Yeah. Exactly. That's
And,
how I feel too.
but then it just things show up when I start. It's like Dr. Joe Vitale always said, and Tony Robbins says this too. It's ask a question, question everything.
Right.
And that's how my journey started. And I came across my partner, Jeffrey Gardner. He introduced me to ancient aliens.
Wow.
At the same time, I was also listening to an audiobook called Conversations with God. And
Okay.
I just connecting the dots. And I was just blown away because I've never been outside of the world. So you see pictures of other places and you wonder, because pictures doesn't give it justice until you experience it yourself.
Yeah. Exactly.
So how did you come across, the ancient civilization and discovering about the Anunnaki?
So I would say, like, I grew up in a Catholic household. Like, my grandparents were born, like, my paternal grandmother was born in Bet Sahur, Palestine, so near where Jesus was born. And they're very, like, strict Catholics. And my parents, not so much, since my dad was born here in the US, but they still, had us go to church and stuff. And I just never believed it. Like, honestly, I just was like, it seems like lies. It like, I remember doing, like, the first where you confess your sins. I forget the name of it right now. To the priest. Yeah, confession. Thank you. Why didn't I think of confession? Because I was talking about confessing. And I was just like, I don't have anything to say because I honestly didn't think like I had done anything wrong. And it's like, why would I tell this strange man, even if I had, like, why would I tell this strange man, what sins I had? Like, you don't absolve me of, like, my sin. So I've always just sort of been like the rebel and the questioner from a young age. And then when I've always been interested in ancient civilizations. So, like, I think when I was 12, I was really obsessed with the Sumerians and Babylonian civilizations. I remember that topic came up in history class, and I was just like, oh, that's like, I started getting visions of like what the ziggurat temples look like. And, just like what I saw, like visions of workers mining and stuff, and, just like what civilization was like. And then the Minoan civilization had always interested me a bit, like in school, but it really came about more when I was like 19. I started doing some research on it and finding out that I was one of these people and that I had a really big role in society. And I had a lot of visions of being a priestess slash goddess in this Minoan civilization. And I had these like deep, deep memories of the magic that we would do. There was this particular cave, and all these people would get together and we would do different magic. And then it started translating to other civilizations. I realized how I was the same goddess, but in different civilizations. The same. So then, for me, it was just a bunch of research, like connecting these names. Well, this goddess sounds a lot like this goddess, and not just for myself, but just researching all the gods and goddesses in different pantheons and how they're similar. And basically, it comes down to that there's just a few, and they go by different names in different civilizations and appear to people differently. So like if you're from Africa and you feel like that strong connection, you might see Lilith as a Black woman. Or if you're like a white person, you might see Lilith as a white person. She just appears how she appears, to each civilization, so that basically it makes sense to that civilization. Like they're going to have an ally that looks like them, and they don't
Well,
really look like that, they are ethereal bodies, so they can take like any form basically. And
well,
so
there.
that was how I got started with that. And then I became an actual anthropologist, going to school for it. And I'm studying right now ethnology and linguistics for my minor. So I like
Wow.
to study different cultures, but I still have a really deep love for archaeology as well, obviously because of ancient civilizations. But more like for a practical job, I'm sticking with ethnology because that applies to like the civilizations that are here today and how you can study them and understand things about people.
Well, wow, that's fascinating. And you talked about just a moment again how you were connected to the Nahomans. Can you briefly share with that who they are?
Yeah, the Minoan civilization. So they were from the island of Crete, and they spanned up until maybe 2000 BC, from 4000 BC to 2000 BC, and they were a seafaring people. Their main goddess was named Potnia, or Potnia, and basically that just means the great lady or the great goddess. And they're kind of the preface to other Greek goddesses. So basically, the great goddess just takes different forms. So there's like Dictina, she's like the seafaring version. You've probably seen the Minoan mother goddess. She's got in statues, she's got the cat on her head, and she's got snakes in her arms, and she's got like a tight bodice in the middle, and like bare breasts, and she looks very powerful. And basically, she represents like the ground. Snakes are being held in her hand, and also the connection to the above ground, which is the cat on her head. So she connects with the animals, but she's also from lower realms as well. So she's very interesting. She's multifaceted. She's not like good or evil. She can kind of use dark magic when she wants to, or she can be helpful. But I had visions of that civilization falling as well, and then how she kind of moved on to as Isis in the Egyptian pantheon. So she just sort of basically takes different forms at different times, or even simultaneously, because some of these civilizations, did occur at the same time as well.
Yeah, I have a connection to the high priestess Isis.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
And yeah, because when you started talking about her, my body was just vibrating, and I was like, "Yeah, I know. Okay, okay, okay." um, well, what I find fascinating, and you know, I'd love to get your feedback on this, is
Mhm,
doing my history, and come to find out, reading Sitchin, Eric von Daniken,
mhm,
um, and there's other researchers and philosophers, George Smith. These are like in the 1920s, and there's been so many other people that when they started excavating, and discovering, all these, temples and writings, and the cuneiform writings, the Sumerian texts, and Ambarambi, the
mhm.
code of law.
Yeah,
I mentioned about that, like, there was close to 300, but they were able to decipher, I guess, 280. I was, like, blown away, like, how do they know about physicians' fees, wages, and, all this stuff, and
yeah,
taxes back in those times?
yeah.
And
Well,
then
they were advanced, definitely, that we
well
think of them as like, oh, they're primitive people. They're just like us. I mean, they had basically the same technology, if not more, because they're not going to write about all their secrets that they had.
well, to me, it was like they had, and they talk about the gods and goddesses, and there was, like, 300 to 1,000. Now, let's get real.
Right,
They Wouldn't you agree that they weren't gods and goddesses? The people there
right.
in their now, I'm like comparing then and now. I see something coming from a sky in this odd shaped form.
Mhm.
Oh, why would we first think that must be a god? Oh my God, there's a god coming from the heavens. It's the sky, for crying out loud.
Right.
And going back in history, even in biblical times, and even in Barambi, they were aliens, extraterrestrial, highly evolved beings that came from another. But in those times, based on the language, based on what was going on in that time, this is what they, our ancestors, thought it was. Would you agree?
Right. That's how they were interpreting it, exactly. They started to lose, like, their connection with being star people as time went on, so the tales went on, but they didn't really have that connection that they are those people. There was, so basically as religions developed, as agriculture developed, we tended to see more and more, monotheistic religions, and even so with the more pagan religions too. Really, just patriarchy took hold even in pagan times, and then got even stronger and stronger once um, monotheism came into play. So they want to believe that, like in religions, that there's this separation from God, when no, we are all God. Like we're all one, really. We're all connected. We're particles of God, basically. And so I think that was just basically so they could get their workers to, take care of the wheat crops. And if they have this, like, oh, well, God will smite you if you don't work hard, kind of thing, then they could keep their people in trouble, on task and out of trouble. So that was just a control mechanism. But I mean, there are always people that never forgot, like us, that we are like from the stars. We are star people and star seeds, and we haven't forgotten our star family.
And I'm just now connecting with that,
That's great.
being a star seed, a light worker, and I come from Clarion.
Clarion. Okay, that's awesome.
So I was like, okay, where's Clarion? I just stargaze, like, where are you? Like, can I see you? um, but what I find fascinating is, I don't know if like this is what I'm questioning and seeking out, but it seems to me, reading the Anunnaki pantheons, that there were other species here
Yeah. It's
as
been going on a long time.
so I was like, oh, at first I was like, oh, so the Anunnaki, who are extraterrestrial beings, came from Nibiru, okay. And from my understanding, there was Inky, Enlil, Ninhursag, because Ninhursag was they're like us, bigger and taller. She actually reigned and resigned when Ambarambi took reign.
Right.
Like he removed her out. And I'm like, well, that was stupid, but whatever.
Right.
Um,
Part of
but
patriarchy.
yes, but Ninhursag and Inky were the ones that created the what now is the human sapiens, the human beings, because they crossed the DNA into the other, I guess you want to say Neanderthals or, beings to create what we are now.
Right. Exactly. So what I believe is that, and then, this was controversial when we were talking in the Anunnaki groups, because I think some people are just literal Bible believers. They still believe, that there's aliens or that they come from somewhere else, but they're limited to the scope of the Bible. And this is where I like move outside of that. And so I believe that Enlil is who most Christians worship today, like who worship as God, even though he's not the true God, like one universe source. He is basically tricking most of Christians. And that's not to say that they can't access true God, because I think they do at times. There are a lot of Christians that, despite being real strict with the Bible, they're still connected with true source. So I wouldn't discredit that like they're stupid or just not connected. But I believe that Enlil has got everyone tricked, basically, at this point, into thinking he's the God. He is a God in the same way that Enki, Lucifer, same name, Ea is that entity, one entity. But basically, he has tricked a whole slew of people into believing he is the God, like the one.
Well, I
And
think it
there's,
was Murdoch that went and did that.
yeah,
Inky's son, not so much Enno, but I, saying instead of like Enlo was one that tricked, why not the people?
yeah, the people. Yeah, that
The
makes sense. Well,
people decided that is the God, and actually, in in reality, it's you're worshiping one, an extraterrestrial being, and a false
right,
God. He's not God. We are
right.
all gods.
We're all gods. Yeah. Yep, exactly. There's
Gods and
no,
goddesses, and I keep telling the audience, we're spiritual beings, sexual beings inside of a human being.
exactly.
I am a goddess because I have the female parts. I'm God in this
Exactly.
female human being. That's it.
Yep. These
My
are just our avatars, our 3D avatars to incarnate on this earth. That's it. We're
and
infinite.
I find this fascinating because Thoth talks about, you know, going into the Yaminti and the dark, his soul, he left his soul and reincarnated and transformed into somebody else.
Hmm.
And if you think about back in those times, how the planet Earth was, the most of the continents were like clustered together, and then something happened and they started separating.
Right.
So there were seven. Well, from my understanding, Inky and Ninhursag created seven males and seven females.
Right.
So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why would you create seven males and seven females? Wait, there's seven continents. So you station a pair, a pair, a pair, a pair, a pair.
Yep.
Then my next question was, Okay, so you created 7 males, 7 females. Were they babies or were they adults? Because
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
because then you had to take care of them. You had to wait until they become an adult. Hello. But then
Right.
you put them back to sleep because apparently they weren't reproducing
Right.
because you guys were watching them have sex. They didn't see you watching them have sex. Or you went and got them and put them under a sleep, did something to make them be able to reproduce. And that's where the
Mhm.
misconception of Adam and Eve comes in.
Right. Adam and Eve were just one version of humans. There were many more experiments way before.
But
Um,
they weren't called Adam and Eve based on our English language, yes, but they were actually called someone else.
yeah, I believe it's Hawa is Eve, and Adam is it's still Adam, but just more of an Arabic.
Adapo,
Adamu.
Adamu.
Hmm. Yep. Hawa and Adamu.
And it's fascinating to me that I was like, wow, that just like resonates. That so makes sense.
It does completely.
And it's sad because, you know, people are being so small-minded. They believe that, oh, well, this is the word of God. It was filled by the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, I'm filled with the Holy Spirit. You're filled with the Holy Spirit. What is the difference between those times and now? It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. They're forgetting, like, so what I believe is that Enlil wants to be exalted, right? But Enki wanted to be equals, and he stood for freedom and being the rebel because he rebelled against God, but really it was just his brother Enlil. At least that's what I believe. And he stands for the underdog and helping those who don't have a voice. And so he actually is of the light. I mean, his name literally means in Greek it's Heosphoros. That's what a Lucifer means.
Theosporos.
Yeah, Heosphoros, and that means or Heophorus. So that just means the light bringer, basically. The
Oh,
same word as Lucifer, just the more English way of saying it is Lucifer. So
I
he is
know.
literally the light bringer, and people demonize him.
I
I
really,
think find it so funny.
well, reading conversations with God with Neil, I like I'm listening to the audiobook and I'm just encouraging everybody to go and get the audiobook of the trilogy, book 1, book 2, book 3, because the narrator of like the essence of God's voice, at one time you hear a masculine, but then it changes into a feminine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he tells us like there's no such thing as the devil, Satan, Lucifer, whatever why would I create something to damn myself and put myself in purgatory and a hell? like, and I was like,
Exactly.
I asked that same damn question.
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense because God is the light. God doesn't punish, God doesn't condemn, you know. So I believe that's all Enlil's doing. So Enki's name, En and then Ki in the Sumerian language, just means Lord of the world. So the En
Mhm.
part, Lord, Ki, world, Lord of the world. He was supposed to be the ruler, but Enlil was jealous of Enki always growing up. So they share the same. I think they have different mothers,
Different mothers, but
but same father. Yeah,
Anu was the
exactly.
one that told Enlil to be the thing. But here's the thing that's fascinating to me because my partner Jeffrey, he's like, it was a military organization. Think about it.
Exactly. That's pretty much what it was. It was just a star version of military organization.
To create primitive workers for the gold for the resources. And I
Hmm.
was like, well, if that's the case, then we were all slaves. Our
Exactly.
ancestors were slaves. And then I was like, wow, between the slavery, the military, and religion, I see history repeating itself. That emotional energetic trauma is continuing to play itself out until we all fucking wake up. And I'm like,
Exactly.
we gotta wake up. This is
That's the
nonsense
point.
now.
That's the point of being here on this 3D Earth, is to awaken. I mean, that stuff is necessary too. As much as it sucks, it's also necessary for us to heal and get past and learn things from, so that we don't keep repeating it and we can actually take this planet into the fifth dimension.
So then it was, because from my understanding, how this is how politics, religion, and the military, I guess, organization of divide and conquer, and you know, seeing this all play out. But we've been here so many times that it's like, okay, I don't know how many times I've been here, but I am so over this and I'd like to see change. And then
Absolutely.
it's, how do you feel about what do you know about the fifth dimension and how it's an important process of us ascending and awakening?
Absolutely. Well, I think Enki's a big part of that, Lucifer. So him being the light bringer, he's going to usher in a part of that. And there's many, many other star families that are doing that too, like the Arcturians and Pleiadians, you name it. There's many, many. The Syrians are all trying to get the Earth to ascend. But part of it is waking up from the false beliefs. So waking up from God, who's actually Enlil, and his control. And a lot of
That's an alien, by the way.
he's an alien. Yeah, exactly. Alien slash God, same thing. Angels, demons, they're all the same too. They once hung out with each other. They're just names that people assigned to them. Once religion came around, they decided you were good, you were an angel, you were bad, you're a demon. But really, I mean, they all work the same, and they're all just aliens from different planets. Um, So I think that the way that we're going to be ascending is by the help of our star families, and breaking out of the modes that we're in, like even just the way that we do our food. It's so corrupt. All these scientific studies say that, oh, all these chemicals are fine for you. And, they try to deny that that organic food is better for you and stuff like that. And that, not just that, but just the way the food is produced, like big slaughterhouses, and the way that we charge people for food is so corrupt as well. Like only the rich can afford like the good organic food, and the poor people work 3 jobs and they can just have time for like a Burger King break or something like that. Like all of that has to change for us to ascend to the fifth dimension. So the way we do our food, we're going to basically have to, it's sort of like going back to the beginning, but also we're still going to have the technology that we have now, and even better, but we're going to go back to ancient times in a sense too. So it's kind of like a full circle. And we're going to have technology that allows us to feed every person on the planet. And we don't have to like monetize it. Food is just going to be food. Healthcare, clothing, houses. It's all basic stuff. It's not something that the elite are corrupting people over. Like no more like bad landlords, no more elitism when it comes to taking care of people's basic needs. The healthcare system, that's got to go. I mean, that's what we're seeing with the pandemic right now. It's shining the light on how corrupt our healthcare system is. And people are starting to wake up and see, all the wrong things that are going on, like charging people $1 bazillion if they get sick with COVID. They already went through something traumatic, and then they get like $1 million bill once they get out. Or even just the way that they treat things in the hospital, and they don't offer like a lot of preventative methods. Like most doctors are just like, oh, you have cholesterol, here's this pill. Whereas I've seen a lot of success stories with myself and my friends going to holistic doctors. And I mean, it is a lot of work. You have to clean up your diet and take a lot of supplements and exercise and stuff. But I mean, you can go around pharmaceuticals, let's say 80% of the time. Of course, there's going to be exceptions, like where somebody really needs medicine. And so, keeping that in perspective, that it's not all evil, but it's not all good either, the way that we overdo things. So basically, we're going to have to break down all these structures: the healthcare system, the food system, the government. The government as we know it has to break down, and it already is starting to. Distrust is becoming apparent with a lot of the things that are going on, and all the protests, like the truckers in Canada. They don't want to do the vaccine, and so they're lining up on the borders, just stuff like that. We're starting to see that people aren't happy with the way that things are, and others are just clinging to it. If you notice the fear on Facebook, like people are just like, oh, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mentality. That's got to go, because you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you don't have bootstraps. You have to have community. You have to have. So the way I see the ascension working is basically like we have to become community based, and we have to use technology for good. We have to stop using things like plastics. We have to stop trashing the planet. We have to stop using petroleum like entirely. We have to come up with new energy systems for running our vehicles and making medical equipment or whatever we use plastics for, plastic bags, plastic water bottles. And so I think Enki is a really big part of that, along with our other star family, in bringing in that light. And I think more and more people are going to start to connect with true spirituality and break away from religion. I think religion is really the key to all the rest of it, because you look at history, agriculture started 10 to 12,000 years ago, and that's when we started to really see civilizations work more in a modern way, like how we see them now. And so then you started seeing the religions, and the religions kept control of the people. And then patriarchy took more and more over. And so we have to also move to more egalitarian society as well, like females and males working together. It's not good for the females. Extreme feminism isn't good either, where it's like hating males and making fun of them, because it's just the same thing that's done to us. We can't let the hate that happened to us work so terribly on us that we, in turn do it to others. So I see that like with my family being Palestinian, what I see is that the Jewish people went through a horrible atrocity, but then instead of processing that and using it for good, then they went ahead and enslaved the Palestinians after the nation of Israel was formed in 1947. And so they're not learning. That's why they're going to reincarnate. And if we want to stop reincarnating, we're going to have to learn those lessons that, hey, even though if hate happened to us, we can transmute that and turn it into love and not be bitter and not oppress others just because we were oppressed. Because that's just how the cycle goes on and on.
Yeah, it's a pattern. It's a generational, emotional, energetic traumas that keeps passing down from generation to generation until you wake up and realize.
Exactly. And once you do, you can start healing your whole ancestral line. You start working on yourself. And like what I've noticed is that my spirit guides come in more, and they thank me or they show me visions of like what they've been through. And you also start to have compassion, because I used to have a bitter attitude being a complex PTSD survivor, like, oh, the way that people parented was so horrible and they're just a-holes, basically like, oh, they used to spank their kids and they used to do this and that. But I was shown visions and things, and they were reacting to a harsh world. So they were really doing the best that they could with what they had at the time. Like, even in, let's say, the Victorian era, which is really not that long ago in the scope of it, like they had a view of children being not seen and not heard. And it was basically like the nannies took care of them, and like parents didn't want to see them. And if they got out of line, you hit them. And I started reflecting on that. And even that is because they were trying, their children died a lot in those times. I mean, that was before vaccines and before good health care and even sanitation. And so their hearts were hurting from losing so many children. So they had to have that distance to protect their hearts from all that hurt of losing children. Because if they got too close, then they could lose that child, and then it would be that much more devastating. So I think a lot of it for us is like not judging people as well. That's going to bring us into the fifth dimension, is just trying to see things for what they were and don't like make an opinion on it. Like, if you really were to speak it out loud, does it sound fair? Does it sound kind? If you're judging
Mm.
people of the past, and just let that go and say, oh, I'm sorry that you were hurting, and namaste, let it go, kind of thing.
Well, not only that, but it's like, oh, you know, I've heard like let the past go. Well, you really can't let it go until you understand the pieces and the parts of it
Exactly.
and how things were, like, even with the gods and goddesses. Like Ninhursag is a perfect example. She was who took care of administrative, things back in those times. This is like what, 250,000 years?
Right. So
You
long
know?
ago.
So, and there's like so many, I mean, they were in charge of, Ninhursag was the earth, fertility, and then there was one for the water. There was one that you mentioned early, or about the seafarers, and they had roles,
Exactly.
just like a job.
Mhm.
And
Exactly.
they were so highly evolved and they knew their power.
Exactly.
And but then it was like, well, what the hell happened? They were doing good. They were helping the men. They were doing all the what I feel like women have the knack for kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's silence. Back in the Pakistan times and Iran and Israel and all them, women did not have a voice.
Right.
Women were not allowed to get an education or even go into the temples.
Exactly. But back then, back in the ancient civilizations, we had the sex worship, like prostitutes, and that's really a negative word for them, because we wouldn't call them that then. They were like responsible for ecstatic sexual energy. Like, you would go in the temple and you would have sex with these priestesses and you would be enlightened, and like you would pay them money and they would help you, spiritually, sexually. So it was a totally different thing back then. Of course, it started to get more and more corrupt, with men exploiting that over time, but at least they had, a place. It's like women don't have a place in the church. That's what I always saw, going back to like my Catholic upbringing. It's like, even now with this supposedly like progressive Pope Francis, he still won't even let like a woman be a priest. There's some like clerical positions or whatever, but not, you know, it's like, why are you taking our power away? Why are you so afraid of us? And it's because they knew we had power and they've always tried to squash it. That
But
power
they
was
can take
intimidating.
advantage of it and sexually molest you and rape you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And, I've come to realize that, the even with Christianity,
Mhm.
it's they're the biggest murderers in religion throughout
Exactly.
history. 50 million. 50 million.
Exactly.
And if you start reading, I mean, good place to start is Deuteronomy.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. You could just
You
start
know,
the
oh,
Bible.
the Lord God, but they don't realize when someone's speaking about, oh, the Lord told me or the Lord God told me, it wasn't a male figure. It was actually who was reigning at those times,
Right.
who were considered a Lord, which is a title,
Exactly. Lord, not the Lord of all, just
or
Lord.
God. It
Yeah,
was who was reigning in that certain area.
exactly.
And
That
I'm like, wow, like, I don't want to be a part of that religion or any
exactly. Hate.
religion.
It's hate in disguise. They wrap it up in cute little Bible poems about kindness and, like,
Well, it's contradicting.
but it's not that. It's really not that. That's why I say Enlil is actually evil. Enki, they told him, everyone, put the bad name on him that he was evil, but he's actually the light bringer, and Enlil is actually the evil one. So they have it all backwards, and they've all brainwashed us into thinking
Well, not only that, but it's plagiarized,
it's
and
plagiarized.
it comes originally from the cuneiform writings, the emerald tablets, and
Exactly.
everything is just copied and pasted. And oh, we're going to change this, and oh no, we don't want them to put that in there because it's talk about aliens. Let's get rid of that. And oh, forget about
Exactly.
Enoch. That is too crazy for them, because it was
Exactly.
in order to control the mass,
Yep.
put
Control the
fear
masses.
in mankind. Because
Absolutely.
if you didn't convert to Christianity and the religion back in those times in certain places, even from Europeans, the Spaniards, and all of them,
Yeah.
you got tortured, you got crucified,
Oh, yeah.
you got burned.
Family has some history there. There here local in New Mexico, there's this group called the Penitentes, and basically they were secret Jewish converts. But so when they had the Spanish Inquisition back in those times, they were originally Jewish and then they converted to Catholicism. Then when they came over here to New Mexico, they were still Catholic, but my grandma remembers going in the forest and seeing her father and a bunch of like family members whipping each other. And the whipping is basically like they were emulating like how Jesus died, but really it was like a punishment on themselves, like self-flagellation and self-shame and self-hate for converting to Catholicism is really what it was. So it was sort of Catholicism in disguise, but they felt that they had betrayed their Jewish religion and culture. So, they're going to suffer like how Jesus did, since Jesus was a Jew also. So it's
Well,
really interesting.
Jesus really didn't suffer. He didn't, it's some of that was made up.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. But
They
I mean, that's what they did to justify it. There's just such deep pain, is what I was getting at with that, with all these religions and what they inflict on people. And, you don't have your choice, or you feel forced into it and something feels wrong about it, but you have to do it because it's tradition and blah, blah, blah. And really when you can just say, fuck that. Like you can invent your own spirituality, like whatever calls to you, and you can speak the truths that come to you. And if you start connecting with your Anunnaki side or your Syrian side or your Alpha Centauri side, your Arcturian side, all you have to do is just ask and you'll get messages. You can do meditation, you can call them by names, and they're our family, so they'll always answer, and they
I'm
always have good advice.
Inky and Thoth.
What's that?
I said I'm drawn to Inky and Thoth.
That's awesome. I'm definitely drawn to both of those as well.
Whoa, I'm getting hit. I'm like, oh, okay, hi. I'm like, are you guys here? Because I'm like feeling it, like
Oh
feeling
yeah.
the
They
vibration.
they're witnessing this for sure, yeah.
Um,
When we speak
and,
their names, they smile.
yeah, and I'm like, sometimes I have conversations, you know, and it's funny because I speak out loud. I'm like, Inky, what the fuck were you thinking? Like, how, we're repeating history because of the things that you guys did in our creation and doing, and then the hatred. I mean, I was connecting with Inky in love with Cain and Abel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are connected for sure. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm like, do you see how? And then the human beings watching you guys behave the way you are doing, we just mimicked you.
Exactly. Right. Well, that's our model. That's what, and God's not perfect either. So that's something to keep.
What?
Gods are not perfect either.
No, but I was like, do you see the dilemma here? Like, you see what I'm seeing now, understanding, like, oh, we got that from you, and we're just replaying it. So, how do we fix that?
Well, I think that not all of them were completely in the fifth dimension back then. They have light and they have dark, like especially with Enki and Enlil. And the same thing with Enlil too. He probably wasn't corrupt back before he came over as Lord of this earth, which was not even his
Ego.
full position, since we know that Enki's name means the Lord of the world. They were brothers and they had good and bad, just like people. It's hard to label a person, oh, they're all good or they're all bad. And so anybody can come back into the light when they want to, ultimately, is what I've learned. You just have to want to, and you have to strive for the better. And like a lot of people are on their way to do that. They're giving up hate, they're giving up greed, they're giving up shame, all the negative emotions. We're trying to unlearn those from our DNA and just reprogram like what our original light code should be before corruption came about.
Right. And to me, it's like now there's like, well, in order to understand, good, bad, up, down, fat, thin, small, tall, you have to experience both to know the difference.
Exactly. Yin and yang. Like, wouldn't it be boring? Like if there was just, I mean, I think that's basically why the 3D world was created. It would be so boring if it was just all good and all happiness. And I think humans are bored with that. Like we have to have some drama. And I remember listening to some Arcturian channel on YouTube, and they were saying sometimes to experience something, you have to experience the opposite of it. And I was like, that's exactly true. Like, how would you know what love is if you didn't know what hate was? Or how
Hmm.
would you know pain if you didn't then have like reprise from that pain and like calmness and healing? So you have to have those things in balance. They're an important part of the universe and we can't discredit them. So, like with the way that I work, I'm sort of a gray magician. There's dark and there's light and there's different times for that,
Hmm.
you know. And, all love and light is good, but you have to keep that in perspective with what the opposite of that might be.
Right.
Otherwise, there isn't any light, really. You can't have that without the dark to balance it.
And that's, there it's always, I don't want to say always, but I'd like to say that a more balance and harmony.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then when our energy, our frequencies that we emit to bring in more balance, the earth is also
In balance.
balanced. So because we're connected to this earth, we're connected to everything
Exactly.
as
It's
well.
vast. We can't even fathom all of what we're connected to, truly, because it's so vast.
And so what are you currently, besides studying, what are you currently doing? Because you have in your photograph, it's cryptic.
Oh, that was the photo company that did my headshot. But my page is El Komar Mejnoon Healing Works at Instagram or Facebook. and that just means the crazy moon in Arabic. It just came to me, like I always like the word Majnoon, and it means crazy. And then I asked one of my relatives what the word for moon was, and I was like, I want to be the crazy moon, you know?
And I'm so drawn to the moon, all the cycles of the moon.
And I think it's just about defining what like sane and crazy really is. Because going back to like, I think Christianity is insane, and most of the religions here on earth are insane. You
They
know,
are.
redefining what we think is good and bad, you know? And
Well, it's just I laugh, and I love hearing parts of the conversations with God because I'm like, I asked that same question too, or I knew that. How did I know that? But I knew that kind of thing moments. And it's, we're all connected. We're all souls living, I have this mug that I'm creating, and it's something I'm like, I'm just a spiritual being having a human experience.
mhm, absolutely. Yep, that's exactly it. Don't
Yeah,
lose touch with that part because we're more than just human. Human is just the outer avatar.
right. And so you do some healing works. Can you explain to the audience of, you know, the
Yeah.
healing modalities and the healing techniques that you use?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I do sound and music healing. I've always been into music. I played piano from an early age and sang. So I'll do like some healings with my keyboard. I have like a million effects. So I have like different sounds from all over the world. Like I can do drums or marimbas or whatever calls to me. And then, I'll just intuitively chant. And like when I've been meditating for myself, I've come up with like an Arcturian birth song, for instance. That's on my Instagram page. And basically, I got the intuition that like all the Arcturians have this birth song that like is sung to them whenever they're born. So their parents will sing the song, and it's like telling them the tale of their life, basically, because they know like who they are. And so I just meditated, and I came up with the words were completely like an alien language, and I haven't worked out all of what the translation means, but like more and more when I practice, I can start to figure out and translate those words. And another modality I do is crystal healing. We're all connected to these crystals. The crystalline structures basically hold information they did on other planets and they do here. And the more that we can connect to them, they help us heal our DNA and get us more in line with our ancestral DNA, the way that it was supposed to be programmed to, and access parts of our brain that we're currently not as humans, since we only use a small portion of our brain. They also hold memories and things about our past, like not just our personal past, like lifetimes ago, but the history of the earth. Like, for instance, Lemurian seed crystals are one of my favorites because they tell you about the ancient land of Lemuria and how that worked back then, what the people were like. If you hold it, you'll just feel it. So I do crystal healing for people. I do smudging. I've also made candles, like custom candles that have herbs and crystals embedded in them to worship a specific god or to clear your body of whatever ailment is going on. I also do nutritional counseling. And a lot of that is like, I'm not a doctor, but I have the anthropology, knowledge of eating and how evolutionarily we have eaten these certain foods since ancient times and what's good for us, that sort of thing. So I do like nutritional counseling and can even do like meal planning for people, herbal and dietary supplement plans for people. I've worked out like one of my friends suffering from bipolar, and I got her on some different supplements and herbs to help her and some crystals, and she's doing a lot better. And I also do post abortive healing work. And that's to help women who have gone through abortions to heal any trauma that may happen to them or the spirit baby, and to let that go and realize that, it was for the best, that people can move forward with that, that sometimes those decisions are for the better and they shouldn't be shamed, or, people shouldn't be hated. Because I see a lot of that with religion,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
that they're really after women having control of their bodies. And it's really more about that than it is the baby. And so I'll do some healing in different modalities, like it could be herbs, it could be music, sound, it could be writing down a prayer, or like even just like burning a piece of paper with the baby's name to set it free, or connecting with the spirit baby, stuff like that. Um, and I think that's about it. Yeah. And I read runes and tarot cards and oracle cards as well.
I have a few oracle cards, like
I
right.
love them. I think they're wonderful.
I have the goddess power, the mystical shaman oracle, the star seed, wisdom of house of night, past life, and indigo angel.
Oh, those all sound wonderful. I have an
I think-
Egyptian regular tarot deck, and I have a goddess tarot deck, which has goddesses from around the world. I have a shamanic oracle set that has different, mostly Native American modalities, and different cards represent like different ceremonies that they would have, or different musical instruments that they would use, like flute medicine or drum medicine. It's really beautiful. And I've given some really good readings to friends with that one. So
oh, wow.
really, really healing. I love that one. I think that's my favorite deck there.
Oh, that's impressive.
Thank you. But I work
And
with many gods and goddesses as well. They just come to me at different times. And I believe that we're all connected to them, and that we just have to open our eyes and our ears and our brains, and we can all receive that information. It's not like any one of us is like more powerful than the other. We all are connected to that information.
absolutely. And I my channeling has, like, I guess, upgraded,
Hmm.
and the language that I've been speaking, I'm learning of discerning masculine energy and feminine energy, but I just don't at this time. I was like, okay, you know what? I have a hard time speaking, I know a little Spanish, a little Italian, a little French, but I'm like, man, when I channel, I'm speaking that language like there's nothing. And I'm like, how come I can't, I want to be able to speak English, I mean Italian, Spanish, and French, because I really love the language. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I have a difficulty, a challenge in it. But it's like amazing when I go into that, I guess, that trance, and they come in. It's
Yeah.
like my whole demeanor changes, and I just go. It's like it's their frequency is so much higher.
Oh, absolutely.
And when they come in, it's like somebody taking a taser gun to me and just turning that volume up.
Exactly. And it's not like we have human bodies with a larynx, voice box, like that's how it's coming through to us, but it's not exactly that to them. That's just how it's translated in our human way of
Mhm.
have just these bodies to channel through. So it's interesting how it comes through, to us. I remember you had sent me some that I think your husband had recorded.
Yes.
And that was like I clearly heard some of like the tones of voices and the pain, like you were talking about your people, I believe, and like what pain they had been through, and you were angry at somebody, you know, that had hurt you in the past or hurt your civilization or your people. And I
Oh,
remember there
wow.
was an old woman there too that was that you were speaking about or through. I can't remember which. But yeah, those things come through really strongly if you really connect to them. And it's really all about like believing that you can, because I always was just like, oh, I can't channel aliens, no way.
Oh, I've channeled aliens. I'm open up to channeling, and someone's like, "Well, aren't you afraid that something else might come in?" And I'm like, no.
Yeah. But you can ground yourself. Like one tip that one of my good friends, Mary, had taught me is create an anchor to something that you love here at home. So like your pet or a plant or like a specific place in your house, like a crystal, and just imagine that tether, like literally like a rope holding on to that object. And then another thing you can do to protect yourself too is like ask the entity, are you in the highest Christed consciousness? Like, are you
What
good?
you of light? That's I'm like, are you
Light
operating with
being
light?
or not? And if there's
Come in.
any hesitation, like at all, you can just say, thank you for your time. Don't want to connect with you anymore, you know? So you don't have to be afraid. Like, that's
No, I'm like, I'm protected. I'm well protected. Hello, do you know who I am?
exactly. Yeah.
That's I just yeah. I'm like, no, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of. The only thing I can honestly say is like spiders and cockroaches.
Oh gosh, I hate those too. It's not like I hate them. They're
I
necessary
don't hate
animals,
them.
but
I just don't like,
yeah, they freak me out.
and snakes.
Spider magic is really important too. You know, spiders do a lot. Ariadne was in the, have you ever looked up the tale of her in ancient Minoan civilization and Greek
Mm-mm.
tales? You know, she's the spider weaver and she's important too. But yeah, they can be very intimidating, you know, strong forces.
Well, I just like when I go, I'm like, oh, I smote you. I transfer your spirit somewhere else. Thank you. You got to go. Can't stay here. Just transmute you.
You're cutting out a little. It sounds sort of pixelated.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
It's sorta, but it's still pixelated.
Aw,
Yeah, it's kind of going. You sound robotic.
robotic. Oh my gosh, that's weird.
I can still hear you though.
So, do you have I think I put a link of how they anyone can contact you.
A link that you can contact me.
Yes, there it's I put it in the description notes for everybody that's interested in getting a session, knowing more, or have any questions, there's a way to
Okay,
contact you.
that sounds great. I'm mostly hearing you. Yeah, it's El Kumar Mejnoon Healing Works or at, you know, the at symbol and then all those words. It's ELQUAMARMEJNOON and then Healing Works. That's at Instagram, or you can just Google that same name on, or
Okay.
find it on Facebook.
Well, I want to thank you so much. I enjoyed this conversation, and I do believe it's your birthday, so I don't want to take too much more time. Enjoy and celebrate a new phase, new chapter, new season on your birthday all year.
Thank you. I really appreciate being on your show. It was a lot of fun, and I hope to see you soon and talk about more things.
Absolutely. You bet.
You have a good day. Bye.
Bye. Well, there you go. I loved having this conversation. I've waited a very long time to talk about the Anunnaki and get somebody else's perspective on it. And I can't, I'm just truly grateful to have Antoinette here to joining us today. And once again, you never know who I'm going to get on my show. So you got to stay tuned to Wake Up with KC. I'm KC.